Social media, as we know, can be distracting. It can be entertaining. It's been very valuable for me personally, connecting my research to outside stakeholders. But I wanted to try to see if it was fine to get students interested in some of the concepts that we're talking about in class and connect them to the outside world. So I do think that the headline of my talk is that it is useful. It can be relevant. And I'll show you one example of why we think that this is true. Now, I started a class here 3 years ago called Climate Adaptation for Infrastructure. It's a graduate class in civil environmental engineering, but it's open to anybody in the college. Typically have about 50 to 60 graduate students, mostly from College of Engineering, but I've had folks from Dietrich and Heinz and undergrads. All are welcome. And we think that this is a really important topic is because, as we see, we have more and more hazards occurring with heavy rains and hurricanes and high temperatures. And infrastructure needs to be designed for a long time. We think that both engineers and other stakeholders need to be able to communicate what damages could occur to infrastructure and how to design and plan for those damages now and adapt to be more resilient in the future. So the class really has a technical component, but part of the learning objective is to get students to be able to describe some of these challenges to both a professional audience and to a lay audience. A lot of times as a civil environmental engineer, you need to be out in front of the public saying, here is why these options exist, here are the different risks and benefits of these options, and I'm going to recommend option C. And so being able to communicate is part of being a good engineer, and being able to communicate succinctly, we hope, is something that we want them to do. So we use Twitter as a social media for this class. And I introduced it as an extra credit, and there's 3 opportunities for extra credit, and this is the extra credit assignment. Connect something that we're talking about in class to your everyday life. And that can be something you're reading in the media. It can be, hopefully, something that they're seeing around in their neighborhoods. And so we'll get a lot of understanding about the things that we're talking about in class and how the outside world is connected to that. And that's really the goal and the objective here. So the assignment, the extra credit assignment, is send a tweet that connects something to class. It's pretty vague. And so I let them all come in, and they have to put this hashtag on it so that I can see them. And that, I let them all come in, and then I give them some feedback about what could be done better, and highlight some of the more interesting ones in class. I typically take the names off when I do that. And so one of the good examples that I want to show is this is a tweet from a student from this year. And this is along Negley Run. If you're going towards the Highland Park Bridge, there's a stretch of roadway there that used to be a stream. Now it's a road. And during heavy rains, there's flash flooding that happens in that area. And tragically, a few years ago, several people died during a flash flood. And so engineers have a responsibility to keep that road safe during and after a heavy rainstorm. Right now that there's actually gates that drop down like railroad gates that keep that road free of cars when there's a super heavy rainstorm, except the last time the gates didn't work. So their fail-safe option wasn't that safe to fail. They've since put some natural infrastructure in that area, and so they want to have more of the water be able to go into the surrounding grassy areas and some of the ravines to get it off of the road faster so that it doesn't flood. And so one of the students presumably went out there or was driving by, or there's a cycle track nearby, maybe she was there, took some pictures, and then made a connection to the green infrastructure class that we were having that week. And I thought that this was kind of a home run tweet. Was the idea is this is something local in our community, talking about the stuff that we're talking about and connecting it to something real and that hazard that Pittsburghers face. Lots of other ones came in that were about media and articles, which is good because we want to make sure our students, kind of as a side benefit, know how to source and comment on relevant and truthful media outlets, right? So this is kind of a secondary sub-benefit is, well, you use this media source, and how do we know that this is a relevant and credible source? And we talk a little bit about that in class as kind of a side benefit. The second one I want to show is another student who was from Los Angeles and was home on spring break and took a picture of the beach And the kind of the week before, we were talking about beach erosion and ways to shore up coastal resiliency, and kind of went and looked for information from the U.S. Geological Service and put this tweet out, which I thought was also a home run tweet. Something where we were talking about coastal resiliency, went and find additional information to kind of scaffold the stuff that we talked about in class, and put this out. One of the things that I want to kind of finish up with is that these were carrots, right? I want to make sure that when you're doing something experimental, that the students weren't nervous about doing it wrong. I wanted them to be able to fail. They're all extra credit. I timed them in the course of the semester so that you had to send one tweet by week 3 and one by week 12 and one by week 18. And so you weren't able to send them all on the last day of class to get the extra credit. And so we were able to encourage them to do this. And then we would be able to talk about them in class very briefly at the beginning of class. Say, here's some of the tweets we saw. This one, here's how I would word this. Here's how I would do this. This one, the media source isn't great. This one is a home run. And then I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to respect their privacy. Most graduate students don't use Twitter. It's for the olds, for mostly. And so they were creating their own accounts that let them use whatever name that they use. And as long as they take a screenshot and either send it to me or point me to it, and we will give them the credit. I also give them the option to opt out of it completely and still get the credit by kind of analog tweets. If they wanted to physically print out something and say, here's what I would have sent, but I don't want it on the internet, I give them that option. I give them full credit. I want to make sure that there's no reason it needs to be on the internet other than when it is, I typically highlight and say, here's some of the excellent things my students are doing, but I want to give that option out. And then finally, they really appreciated the feedback. They loved the idea that we were helping them communicate better. And so part of it was, you only have 140 characters. What are you going to say? Make it important. It was almost like instant presentation feedback that they're getting at the beginning of class, as well as pulling some folks aside saying, we want to make sure that you're doing this in a respectful manner, you're using good sources, and you're representing engineering in an ethical way. And I think a lot of the things that we had worked out really well. Thank you very much.